Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you all had a great break. I'm sharing my screen here in a second, I'm hoping. Just let me know that you're there and that you can hear me. Hello, everyone. All right, got a bunch of showing up right now. So cool. Hopefully, you all had a really great Thanksgiving. Actually had a snow day today. I don't know. I don't think you guys have snow days where you're at, do you? Probably not. I can't remember where you guys are at. Probably not. Anyways, we're up in Michigan. All right. So welcome to everyone. Anyways, snow days in Bolivia. Yeah, I guess not. It's one of the advantages of being in a northern clime. But anyways, so I had a little bit strike and blockade days. Okay, very interesting. Well, that works, I suppose. I bet students look forward to those somewhat. So I guess as I'm queuing things up, you guys could bring me up to speed. What are you guys working on? We're gonna do, I think, one more day of prose prompt. And then I think we're gonna return to the open prompt. We're just gonna kind of circle around. But what are you guys reading right now? Right now, we're about to head into Ibsen. Okay, you're working on free response question number 3, the open prompt. Okay, so next week we're gonna get back into that again. We actually have a video on that already. It was in September. Picture of Dorian Gray. Hello, Isabella. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we'll have a chance to talk about that. Things fall apart. All right. Very tragic works for the most part so far. It's funny how that is. So we're going to be doing Ibsen, which is, more tragedy. Just finish things fall apart. What'd you think of that ending there? It's pretty depressing. So we're going to get a couple new theories of tragedy. We started with Aristotle, actually, in some of his ideas about tragedy. We moved on to Miller when we read Death of a Salesman, has some very particular ideas about tragedy. Tonight, I'm sure my students were very happy. I was able to send them a video to watch on Hegel's theory of tragedy, but we read a lot of tragedy, so we kind of pay attention to some of the things people have talked about. Unexpected ending. Okay. Yeah. So, anyways, we are going to move on, and I'm going to just go through this. We have another prompt that I'm going to look at, kind of the central part of what we're going to talk about today. If you haven't already, make sure to open it up and take a look at it. Hopefully you have a chance. This is actually all the prompts. You cannot separate them out from the AP Central website. So you have to see all of them from that particular year. And so you'll go to page 3, which is the prose prompt. You can also see that they had a 2-poem prompt that year. A lot of those between 2000 and 2010. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the year. We mostly talked about the 1-poem prompt. But this was an anti-war novel, Dalton Trumbo. And so you may want to follow up on this and check out Metallica's song 1, which was inspired by this. And actually, it takes a lot of footage from the movie that was done on this book. Okay, so I'm going to flip over here, and we're going to give you some need-to-know terms this week. I'm just going to go through about 20 terms that I'm probably going to be review for you. Possibly we can use them, and then I want to give you a chance to kind of see some of the things that I noticed with this prompt, and then I'm going to give you my response. I'm going to give you a model response, actually 3 body paragraphs of my response to Dalton Trumbo's passage. Okay, so just a reminder that when we start out sometime in May, we're going to have multiple choice for an hour, 55 questions, 1/2 prose, 1/2 poetry, 1/2 older, 1/2 modern. And then we move on to the free response questions, which is 2 hours, 3 essay questions prompts, which means 40 minutes per question. Question number 1 is the poetry prompt. Question number 2, which we're focusing on today, is the prose prompt. And question number 3 is the open prompt. So I wanted to remind you that poetry and the prose prompt, question 1 and question 2, are really structured the same way. I want to reiterate this pretty much so that you know that when we're working on the prose prompt, we're also thinking about the poetry prompt the way that that's set up. Okay, so remember with poetry prompt in a nutshell, they ask us, how do poets use poetic techniques to convey meaning? And we have lots of different synonyms for all those various things, but it pretty much takes that form every single time. Well, the question that they ask with the prose prompt is, how do authors use literary techniques to convey meaning? So you can see those are pretty much the same prompt. Again, synonyms that you will see, but more or less the same. I guess what you might notice is that some of these are a little bit different. They are more related to prose and, novels and short stories. But really, you should keep in mind that these two prompts are very similar. The open prompt, which some of you are working on right now, is different. But the first two really are very similar. Okay, so Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo. This is him actually at the what is it? He's refusing to testify in front of the House interrogation on American activities. Can't remember the exact name of that, but basically it was during the Red Scare. He was one of the 10 writers who refused to testify and who was blacklisted as a result. Now, he ended up being still pretty successful because he published a lot of things under other names. He wrote the script for Spartacus, is probably the most well-known one, and Johnny Got His Gun got turned into a movie as well. But he was one of the famous 10 who absolutely refused and were in contempt of court as a result. And they were blacklisted in Hollywood at that time. But Johnny Got His Gun is an anti-war novel, and so if you get this URL, you can bring that up and take a look at it. I want to remind you about some of what, well, actually, why don't we look at it? Let's just look at it first. Is everyone good? It seems like no problems over here. Okay. Yeah. Okay, it's pretty heavy. Yeah, it is. Pretty bleak. All right, so let's take a look at this prompt, and I want to read it, and then I'll just remind you about some of the things that we do. And I know this takes a little bit longer, but I think it's good to hear it out loud. But read carefully the following passage from Dalton Trumbo's novel, Johnny Got His Gun. Then write a well-organized essay in which you analyze how Trumbo uses techniques such as point of view, selection of detail, and syntax to characterize the relationship between the young man and his father. Okay, so we can kind of see what they're looking for. We see the prose prompt in a nutshell, such techniques as point of view, selection of detail, and syntax. So 3 things. You don't need to use those things, but you know that actually those are probably present. They are in there, and you can definitely look for them. And then what are we looking for in terms of the meaning? What is the nature of the relationship between the young man and his father? Is it a good relationship, bad relationship? Is it a changing relationship? How do you characterize that? I'd like you guys to kind of see if you can figure out what that is. See if you can characterize that. See if you can come up with 1 or 2 adjectives as to what do you think the nature of the relationship is. Okay, so I'm going to read it. You guys sit back and kind of just see if you can figure out what the nature of this relationship is. The campfire was built in front of a tent, and the tent was under an enormous pine. When you slept inside the tent, it seemed always that it was raining outside because the needles from the pine kept falling. Sitting across from him and staring into the fire was his father. Each summer they came to this place, which was 9,000 feet high and covered with pine trees and dotted with lakes. They fished in the lakes, and when they slept at night, the roar of water from the streams which connected the lakes sounded in their ears all night long. They had been coming to this place ever since he was 7. Now he was 15, and Bill Harper was going to come tomorrow. He sat in front of the fire and looked across at his father and wondered just how he was going to tell him. was a very serious thing. Tomorrow, for the first time in all their trips together, he wanted to go fishing with someone other than his father. On previous trips, the idea had never occurred to him. His father had always preferred his company to that of Ben, and he had always preferred his father's company to that of the other guys. But now Bill Harper was coming tomorrow, and he wanted to go fishing with him. He knew it was something that had to happen sometimes, yet he also knew that it was the end of something. It was an ending and a beginning, and he wondered just how he should tell his father about it. So he told him very casually. He said, Bill Harper's coming tomorrow, and I thought maybe I'd go out with him. He said, Bill Harper doesn't know very much about fishing, and I do, so I think if you don't mind, I'll get up early in the morning and meet Harper, and he and I will go fishing. For a little while, his father didn't say a thing. Then he said, why, sure, go along, Joe. And then a little later, his father said, has Bill Harper got a rod? He told his father, no, Bill hasn't a rod. Well, said his father, why don't you take my rod and let Bill use yours? I don't want to go fishing tomorrow anyhow. I'm tired and I think I'll rest all day. So you use my rod and let Bill use yours. It was as simple as that, and yet he knew it was a great thing. His father's rod was a very valuable one. It was perhaps the only extravagance his father had had in his whole life. It had amber leaders and beautiful silk windings. Each spring, his father sent the rod away to a man in Colorado Springs who is an expert on rods. The man in Colorado Springs carefully scraped the varnish off the rod and rewound it and revarnished it, and it came back glistening new each year. There was nothing his father treasured more. He felt a little lump in his throat as he thought that even as he was deserting his father for Bill Harper, his father had volunteered the rod. They went to sleep that night in the bed, which lay against a floor of pine needles. They had scooped the needles out to make a little hollow place for their hips. He lay awake quite a while thinking about tomorrow and his father, who slept beside him. Then he fell asleep. At 6 o'clock, Bill Harper whispered to him through the tent flap. He got up and gave Bill his rod and took his father's for himself, and they went off without awakening his father. So why don't you guys give me some adjectives? How would you characterize? We want to see if we can go on record and say it as concisely as possible. What is the relationship between the young man and his father? How would you characterize it? Let's see what you guys come up with. You have any adjectives that you might put out there? What are some adjectives that you would use to describe the nature of this relationship? Any thoughts? Bonded, okay. So there's a nice bond there. Close, yeah. I think those are some good descriptions. Anything else? I mean, is this so it's kind of a pivotal moment. How would you characterize that? Is there anything changing? So at 7, at 8, at 9, pretty close, no sort of, tension. What's happening to the relationship right now? This pretty much happens. Coming of age. Yeah, I think that there is a coming of age aspect here, Bruno. Yeah, absolutely. There's some distance, strong relationship. They're bonded by these activities such as fishing. Yep. Son doesn't feel he can be completely honest with his father. Yeah, I agree with that. This definitely feels like a very father and son relationship that I think a lot of us can recognize. His father isn't the center of his attention anymore. Yeah, there's a shift that's occurring here. So it's close. There's definitely a lot of things that suggest some closeness. Relationship is breaking because his son is maturing. Yep. This is pretty amazing because if you read this novel, I mean, it's pretty insane, actually. He is thinking back on this moment. He has been pretty much horribly wounded in war. If you watch the Metallica video after this, you'll see the nature of his wounds, but they are pretty much to the greatest extreme that you could possibly imagine. And he is thinking back on his life, and this was this pivotal moment with his father. And it's incredibly poignant, I think, if you kind of understand the context of this novel. But I won't give that away. Actually, watch the Metallica video after this, and I think you'll pick up on the nature of the story. Okay, so I want to go back to our presentation. I just want to remind you that we use the how to read a poem process, talking about enjoyment, first of all. What would you enjoy? Meaning, we have a lot of different things we can point to there. Certainly any words that we don't know, figurative language. I use this for imagery. I also start using this for characterization and any kind of meanings that I can pick up from that, inferences I can make about the personality or the emotions that the character is experiencing. Structure and language, I mean, obviously we don't have the form of a poem anymore, but we do have syntax and the structure, sentence structure that's being used. We also have the types of words that are being used, and I love this aspect. I think you're picking up on that I love these two things. Reason being is that they're very objective, and I guess I have that kind of side of me that I really like objective things. I actually teach math, by the way, but I like that aspect of it because I can really point to it. Mood and tone, I think, is very important in this prompt because we want to pick up on that, and there is a shift, I think, in some of the moods that are happening here, the tone of what's being expressed. And then finally, a conclusion, and I recommend writing a body paragraph whenever you can. You know, if you take a look at these prompts on AP Central, see if you can write a body paragraph talking about one of the elements of literature, literary elements that is being used to convey whatever the meaning is. Okay, I just wanted to kind of give you this again to show you that there's a lot of overlap between these two things. The poetry prompt, which we already know, there are some things that are particular to poetry, and then there are some things that are particular to prose. Okay, so you know, we have line breaks, rhythm, meter, rhyme scheme, stanza. None of that stuff is going to be present in prose, but we have a lot of things in the middle there that are still going to be present, that we're still going to talk about. And then we have some things for prose prompt that we're probably going to talk about more, like characterization, narrative voice, selection of detail, etc. So what I'd like to do is I want to take a look at my Quizlet set. I will give you this actually once we get done today. And I just want to go over some terms that I think are going to be helpful to you as we look at this. And most of it, I think, is going to be review for you, but certainly worth studying. Let's switch over and look at my Quizlet cards. Let's actually use the flashcards, and we'll go through some of the things that I think we want to think about with literature, elements of literature. Don't talk about these quite as much in poetry, but you know, literature, we definitely want to pay attention to them. So point of view, we've talked about this in poetry. We talked about this with the whipping, if you were with me way back when. But it's the perspective from which a speaker or writer recounts the narrative or presents information. And you can have first person point of view when the narrator is a character in the story, telling the story. Third person objective, it is a point of view where the narrative voice is not one of the characters. So we're talking about he, she, they. Describes none of the thoughts, feelings, or observations of the characters. We can't see into any of their minds. We can see a tear roll down their cheek, and we can pick up on their emotion, but not through their thoughts. Third person limited is when we have access to the thoughts and feelings and observations of at least one character. Third person omniscient is when we have the thoughts, feelings, and observations of multiple characters. And I think this is really important, that if you do see inside the thoughts of someone, why not use it to say, well, this characterizes the relationship. We see their thoughts. We see what they're thinking about this other person. If you have third person limited or third person omniscient, why not develop a paragraph about that, where you really kind of talk about how those thoughts help us to understand the nature of the relationship or the personality of the character. Moving on, narrative voice and style, author's style, the quality that makes his or her writing unique, which conveys the author's attitude, personality, and characteristic speech or thoughts of a first-person narrator. I often think of Catcher in the Rye as a very, you know, kind of cynical quality to his voice, and I think that that's definitely something that's significant that J.D. Salinger really wants in his narrator. Next is characterization. Don't forget about characterization. This would be a great paragraph. Just look at the things that the character, how the writer creates and develops this character's personality. How do you do that? You do it through direct characterization. You literally just say they are blank, adjective, greedy, fearful, shy, whatever it may be. Come right out and say it. That's direct characterization. Indirect characterization, process by which that personality is revealed through speech, actions, appearances, other people's reaction to that character. You could develop a really nice paragraph just talking about characterization. Okay, what are they doing? What are they saying? How are they reacting to one another? And you could say, we pick up on the relationship on the basis of that characterization. Selection of detail. It's a little like imagery. But I think, if you zero in on a certain type of imagery, we saw this with the street last week or the week before, was really negative imagery. There might have been some nice stuff around, but they really focus on details that are really, have certain associations. And then also when they describe Ludi Johnson, they really zero in on vulnerable things. And so by selecting certain details, words, incidents, images, or events, the author creates some meaning there. Okay. Actually, we don't need any of these. These are types of novels. So let's move on. I'm going to give you, I'm getting into types of novels. So, okay. So that's all we need. We need those in order to make sense of this. Let me show you some of the things that I noticed. And actually, I'll share this with you right now. As I'm going through this, I'd like you guys to see if you can find the way that the author uses literary techniques to convey that meaning. Here are my annotations in model response. Let me put this into the stream for you, and you can go there right now if you want to. Okay. And let's pop this in here. So I have put this in the stream. Maybe. So if you want to go there, open up that URL, and you will see some of my annotations in my model response, and you can look at that a little bit on at your own leisure. But all right, hopefully we'll see some people popping in up here. But anyways, notice that I underline and double underline parts of the prompt. I recommend underlining the element side of it, okay, the literary technique side of it, and then I recommend double underlining the meaning. Okay, so I've done that there. Now let's just look at some of the things that I do. I go through the how to read a poem process. I just kind of altered a little bit to fit with prose. So what do I love? Well, I love the simple descriptive language. So that's right out of the gate. I just said I really enjoy this. I really find this beautiful, and yet it's not overwrought. It's just very simple language. You get a very beautiful picture in your mind. In terms of not liking, this little section where it's supposed to be like dialogue, but there's no quotes and it's just like all runs together, I didn't like it. It was difficult to read. And I felt like it was an awkward section to read. Okay, so I think you probably can read into that and see that that was intentional for what the author was kind of conveying at that moment. Moving on to my next thing is just some meaning related things. I use this for imagery, and I noticed that there is some visual imagery. And I want to say, what kind of visual imagery is it? We're talking about pine needles, little delicate pine needles. And I really felt like there was a lot of delicate imagery that was being expressed, which, is kind of the opposite. It's a little bit counterintuitive. It's not like this manly imagery, it's like very delicate imagery that's, being focused on here. And I almost feel like selection of detail. Now, on the other hand, the auditory imagery, the roar of water, I mean, there is this kind of violence to that. In some ways it juxtaposed with the vulnerability or the delicacy of the previous image. It shows that vulnerability of this moment. So I think that that's significant, and I'm going to see if that's something I want to make something of. Moving on, let's see any more imagery. Yeah, I got some visual imagery over here. Again, very delicate, very, you know, micro kind of details here that are very, you see the tender care that the father takes in maintaining this fishing rod. Okay, so one other one that I really just popped out at me was they scoop the needles out to make a little hollow place for their hips. That's kinesthetic imagery. If you remember back to us talking about imagery a few weeks back, it is imagery of or related to, the muscles, joints, and just kind of position of things in the body. It's a vulnerable detail. I mean, that's kind of vulnerable to think about that with regard to, guys, that you would mention this, make a little hollow place for their hips. Again, kind of a surprising amount of delicacy and vulnerability, I think, in the imagery, different types of imagery, which really strikes me. It definitely draws itself to my attention. Moving on to some more asterisks is characterization. Let's see what I have here. I do have some characterization. I thought that this moment where there's this sort of start and stop of this speech showing the awkwardness or disorientation of this moment, I felt like that was some indirect characterization. Like a little while later, he said something else, and he was kind of thinking out loud. Felt like that was some indirect characterization. The way that he is speaking and not speaking really does convey something about the moment. I saw this as indirect characterization just by giving this rod, which is like his prized possession, shows him as generous and sacrificing, and there's a relationship of love here, that I think is significant, that we can't just ignore the fact that they are and were close, and that's what's making this such a powerful and poignant moment. Lastly, a little lump in his throat. I mean, that's a really obvious example of indirect characterization. We're feeling regret, concern, guilt. These feelings are kind of coming up. This is like right before crying, when you get a lump in your throat. And so there are some indirect characterization pieces here that we could definitely point to. I want to talk a little bit about structure here. Let's go to structure. What do I have? I noticed that a lot of the sentences are subject first or loose sentences. These are not fancy sentences. Now, they're compound. They have a lot of conjunctions, but for the most part, we're starting with he, I, it. So we're just starting with a subject and then a verb. Very simple, and in some ways that simplicity is appropriate for these two male characters' personalities, I think. They have a very kind of unspoken relationship, a simple relationship. They're kind of unequal to the task of explaining the difficulty of the situation. One thing that I really like is polysyndeton. Polysyndeton and asyndeton is its opposite. It's when you have more than the required amounts of conjunctions. And if you look throughout this, you will see and. And it's like there's an increasing anxiety as you get further and further on in this. I'm just stringing together all these kind of phrases and clauses, and I just keep going because I'm nervous about what you're going to respond, what your response is going to be. And that polysyndeton, I really feel, shows that increasing anxiety. Again, you see it down here, lots of ands, a little bit more polysyndeton. I want to talk a little bit about the language, and I think we have a lot of simple diction. We have coming, going, get, take, make, just really simple. We are not going to the thesaurus at all with this. There's barely any fancy words. You will never have to look up anything. And I feel like that's significant. Again, not really having the wherewithal to describe the complexity of this experience. I did point out, in case I wanted to use this, it is third person limited. And, he wondered, we don't know what the father is thinking, but we do know what the son is thinking, and we could use that. We could definitely point out the various places where he thinks something or he feels something. I feel like we could definitely develop a paragraph about third person limited and just being able to see his thoughts and feelings. There are a lot of what are known as intensifiers, like very and really, and those types of words, and absolutes, always, never, always. We have a couple over here that are like only extravagance his whole life. And so these are absolutes. These are words that are designed to say there is nothing more, extreme. And so we have a lot of that. And I think that that's significant too, that it shows the significance of this moment. What else do we have? Okay, I think that's enough. So we got some things that we definitely can work with here. And I'm going to scroll down. Now, all I've done here is I have put the thesis. Now, you probably should do a little bit more than the thesis, maybe provide a little bit of context there. I would really keep it pretty minimal. I wouldn't do a whole lot with this. I would spend the bulk of my time working on the body paragraphs, and that's really what I did here. Let me see. So I got one on imagery, and I did zero in on this. First of all, let's look at my thesis. Dalton Trumbull uses imagery, diction, and syntax to dramatize the intimate and changing relationship of the father and son. So this is, I go on record. Okay, I go on record as to what do I think the nature of the relationship is. You have to get it in a nutshell. And if you can say it in that thesis, and your thesis can be to the point and capture it, please do that, and try to make it as simple as possible. Make it one message, make it one kind of characteristic or adjective, because then you'll be able to support it. So you'll see me supporting that all the way through this. I need to show, first of all, that it's intimate. Second of all, that it's changing. It's a little bit, I have to show two things, but it's manageable. And you'll see that I do that all the way throughout. There's imagery. So I talk about those three things that I mentioned. Simplistic diction. Okay, some really simple words that are showing kind of the significance of this moment and their difficulty in really expressing themselves. I know I did this last one, and then you guys can tell me what you think and if you have any questions. Finally, Trumbull uses syntax to reveal the anxiety of a father-son relationship in a state of transition. For one, the sentences most often begin with the subject, conveying the unvarnished simplicity of the boy and his father. Sentences like, they had been coming to this place ever since he was 7, and it was a very serious thing. Show the father and son's relationship as uncomplicated and perhaps unequipped to grapple with the ambivalence. Further, as the boy musters the courage to tell his father about wanting to go off with his friend Bill Harper, the sentences become more prolonged, revealing an increasing nervousness. Many of these longer sentences feature polysyndeton, which conveys an almost breathless apprehension as the boy rapidly tries to explain his reasoning to his father. He said, Bill Harper doesn't know very much about fishing, and I do. So I think if you don't mind, I'll get up early in the morning and meet Harper, and he and I will go fishing. The total lack of punctuation, commas, and quotation marks further emphasizes the son's conflicting emotions as he expresses his desire to join his friend while not taking care not to upset his father. This syntax used throughout the next 2 paragraphs not only shows the significance of this moment in the relationship, but also the boy's obvious regard for his father's feelings. So again, I had to show that, there's some tenderness here, but that this is a shifting relationship. And you guys can tell me whether or not you see that. You should see that all the way throughout, me supporting that same meaning. Okay. So let's go on back, and that's pretty much all I have. Do you guys have any questions? What are your questions? What do you think of that? Let's see what you guys said. So Valentina, you said the use of third-person point of view allows for a more universal view of the father and son relationship. Okay. Yeah, I think that we definitely, seeing an, I guess, universal view, go a little bit more on record as to what is the nature of that relationship, but I think we definitely can see inside of that, and I definitely relate to it. Having a good relationship with my father, but also, you know, there is an awkwardness there, definitely, I think, for some reason. I think that the syntax you could write about how from line 31 to 34, there's a long sentence. He's nervous. Very good. That's what I thought. Repetition of the word end in lines 25 through 28 emphasize that there is something ending. It also may refer to the father-son relationship that's coming to an end. I think you're right. Yeah, you could do something on, you know, some of the things having to do with repetition. I think there's more than that. I think that there's multiple instances of repetition. And we saw that actually with the whipping, that sometimes repetition can show a degree of trauma, you know, that we're very this is a very emotionally affecting moment. Anything else that you guys have questions about? Anything that you found interesting in that analysis? I just gave you a whole bunch of prose prompt related things, and I stuck with some of my favorites again, which I probably shouldn't have. I probably should have gone into characterization point of view, but I ended up talking about a lot of those objective features of the text. I did imagery, I did word choice, and I did syntax. Anything else? Okay. Well, I'm going to call it a day, and I'm going to post a couple more links in here. Again, if you're interested in checking out that video, I'm not a huge Metallica fan, but I actually really, really like One. I think it's a very powerful song. And actually, I dig some of the musical elements that are used, really mimic some of the things that are happening in this passage. There are very delicate parts to the song, and then there's this heavy part to the song, you know, going back and forth between the brutality of war, really, is what ultimately is at the end of all that, and, you know, just the vulnerability of this young boy who goes off to war. So hopefully that was helpful. I'm going to sign off, and I will post a couple of those links that I just shared with you before I leave. Okay. So have a great week, and we'll see you next week. We're going to start talking about the open prompt again. Good night.